From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hi, my name is Aaron Presnell. I work for the Jefferson Institute, and I'm last on the list today, so I'm delighted to see you all. And hopefully we can get pretty soon to the Q&A, because to me that's always the most interesting part of these events. Thanks especially to Martha for gathering us all here today. I feel especially honored because I am not a librarian, nor an archivist, nor an internet entrepreneur. I don't work for any big state institution or any of that. I work for a lowly think tank. I'm a political economist, so I'm very much a stranger in this room. But I think that's part of what's so exciting about this gathering and the Alliance itself is that it really does bring together unusual suspects, and I think that there's already today I've seen some great space for cross-fertilization there. If you like, perhaps I represent one of those boundary zones that were just brought up, where some of the more interesting things happen. Yeah, so the Jefferson Institute is a public policy research institute. That's how we were founded anyway. We do a lot of our work in Eastern Europe, and I spend a lot of my time between Barents Sea and the Chinese border of Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia. And in many ways, we came to our digital archive work by happenstance. Along the way, we use archives a lot. And our local partners in countries where we work use archives a lot for their own research. So we're users, if you like, heavily addicted users. And yet the archives that we encounter and the partners that we work with are really struggling in these countries. And especially in Southeast Europe, where we concentrate a lot of our work, it's not just the standard kinds of challenges that you encounter in archives with resource constraints, and I mean, they're dealing with post-conflict situations, right? So in Serbia, where during the 1999 bombing, they had to box up their archives, break them up into 5 pieces in the hopes that that at least only smaller portions of the archives would end up being totally obliterated. So the challenges that they have to deal with are fundamentally extreme, and I think in many ways that lends itself towards extreme creativity as well in terms of dealing with solutions. And it was in a conversation that we had there with a good partner of ours at the Ministry of Defense in Serbia, who is the director of the Historical Institute. After way too many coffees, we were talking about something completely different, and he leaned back in his chair and he said, you know, this was a nice conversation, but let me tell you about a real problem. It's our archive. We've got this global treasure, and it is literally falling apart. We've got it, you know, locked up in halls, in men's bathrooms. The earth is literally taking it back, and we don't know what to do about it. At the same time, they have tremendous demand on this archive. Especially on the 1990s, you imagine the state itself wanted to learn a lot about those days. There are a lot of historians, of course, who have interests. The Hague War Crimes Tribunal had tremendous interest in accessing those files. And the archivists themselves were really honestly, passionately hoping that they can deliver on that demand, but they just physically couldn't. Right? And so how do we deal with this kind of situation? And I honestly had no idea whatsoever. I was at a total loss. But we went back to various friends of ours in the United States, especially Maryland State Archive, Library of Congress, U.S. National Archive, the Jefferson Paper series at Monticello, which in many ways sets a real gold standard, and got all kinds of great advice and thoughts about the kinds of challenges that are faced, the kinds of software solutions that are available out there. Took all of that back to Serbia, managed to get some small grants together from Rockefeller Brothers Fund and the Knight Foundation two fundamentally different approaches. Rockefeller from a Rockefeller from a post-conflict reconciliation, Knight Foundation from a freedom of information perspective, and created at that time, using proprietary tools, a workflow management solution to help Serbia move their archive from a physical and deteriorating condition into a digital arrangement, and from the full archival perspective, not just scanning. That was the first thing to get into their heads. It's not just about scanning, and that was itself an interesting exercise. I mean, the compromises that we had to make along the way, because for them, they really were never going to have the resources to preserve their physical holdings. And so getting it into digital, it was almost their last hope of having any kind of sustainable preservation strategy at all. Still, those physical holdings which have been digitized are not in the kinds of condition that you would want for long-term strategy for preservation. And ultimately, we, after about 3.5 years, we've now exited that exercise with the Serbian Military Historical Archive. We got them up to a volume. They're doing about 100,000 pages a month. By the time we left, they had done about 3.5, 4 million pages altogether. They have a research room that is constantly packed with people. This year, they're going to go online with a website for online access. And just a few weeks ago, a dark, evil man by the name of Mladic was captured and sent to The Hague, and his indictment is in many ways supported by documents that were found in that by using that digital archive. And so I wanted to, in some ways, I mean, that's a great arc to the circle, but it shows you as well that this can be meaningful and powerful in so many ways, in so many different contexts, right? And to us, ultimately, again, not archivists, what we're really aiming for, or why we're really involved, what our mission is in this, is it's ultimately about power, the power of the community, and the power that the community can derive from memory, right? And to disempower, to strip power away from those who would seek to monopolize memory, and manipulate it, and claim and hide within a fog of war and history. I said the Knight Foundation was one of our angel investors in this, an angel donor. Jack Knight said something really nice in summing up the newspaper business. Obviously, business for him, it was very much about business. He made a lot of money, but for him there was a very strong political agenda as well. And he said that his aim, his mission, was to inform and enlighten, so that the people might know their own true interests. Right? And if we're looking for missions, that's I think certainly is informing and enlightening to know true interests. I think that's a worthy objective, a worthy mission. I think it can help to structure a lot of what we do and why. What we want to do now, and we're in the process of doing, is to essentially rebuild what we built for Serbian Military Historical Archive, open source Java, more or less, so that you all can use it too. Right? We're not a software company. We're not in the business of selling this. We built it because we needed it and nobody else had it available. And yet, once we built it, a lot of people got interested. Ed Poppenfuse from Maryland State Archive came over. He visited twice. The Rockefeller family came over. All kinds of folks checked it out and said, wow, this is really amazing. I think part of that was because we approached it in such a naive way. We didn't realize how hard the job was. And so we just did it. And what we ended up doing was, I think in the end, pretty cool. So now I'll actually talk about it. Right, so what we built was a management tool integrating digitization itself and so production and research. We think of research as a part of production, actually, right? So as your users are constantly giving you metadata back, and so digital archive production essentially never ends, and we built the tool from the beginning to account for that. It's really easy to use and to tailor to your own exercise. It gives you in-house control for everything. We're aiming at, because of the archive that we approach, the Serbian Military Historical Archive has about 40 million pages. We're now doing the National Archive in Sarajevo, which has it's somewhat smaller, about 30 million. And for them, it really does make sense. They're ready to go in-house, and they want to have control of the whole process, and this allows for that. Java, because we think that's important. It's absolutely neutral in terms of repositories. I happen to like DSpace, but that's my preference. Other people have other preferences. We built this in a way such that you can use what you have, you can migrate to something else. You can still stick with a workflow solution and track with us as we grow it. It's server, but it can sit on your server, right? You don't need to work with us at all. In fact, take it and run. Tell us how you hack it, and maybe we can contribute it back. But it's yours to use on your own server if you like. We built it in a modular sense because that's just the reality of how a lot of archives really work. Sometimes you enter metadata first, sometimes you scan first, sometimes it's kind of a mix, and why wait? Let's just get started. It's easy to insert your own already existing metadata, and yet there is a pretty tight central administration with reports. You can see how your teams are doing. Obviously, OCR of poor quality Cyrillic photocopies now, when matched with a half-decent spell checker, can generate incredible results. Right? It's not for displaying to the world because it's still pretty ugly, but as something to search against, it's amazing. It's just really incredible. And again, obviously, to plug into any standard repository. We happen to build a presentation front end on it. We did some other cool stuff with data visualization through another grant from Knight Foundation that lends itself nicely to this with maps and timelines and the like. But it will plug into, Omeka is here. They do some incredible stuff with exhibitions. There's a number of, you can plug it into any front end you like. But essentially, it's all about you having total control to organize it as you need it from A to Z. I think for a lot of small archives, the fear of loss of control is a real inhibitor. And I know that a lot of you all work for big institutions and you have fundamentally different sort of situations, but there's this universe of private providers out there that sort of are part of and evolved from the microfilm industry that a lot of smaller archives just really feel uncomfortable working with, really feel, look, we don't want to give you our content. And why should we trust that you're a company that's going to survive for the next 250 years, and what happens to your hard drives after your company goes down, or you have a succession issue with your family? And so the idea of control, I think, is really important, and we try to address that. Ultimately, we've got a workflow, and I can send this to anyone who's interested in fact, in even greater detail. But I think the main point here is to, again, to reiterate that we really think of the researcher as a part of the production process, and the annotation and the metadata that the researcher is feeding back, even search results themselves, creating search trees, and that at least implicitly supporting the beginnings of social curation, I think has some tremendous power in understanding workflows, production workflows in a broader sense. There's some images from the little factory that we set up there, more or less, in Belgrade. It's also hardware neutral. You plug in anything that you want, from a big room to full of modern industrial scanners to this thing actually this is cool. It's a little hack job for a book scanner. with the photo studio lamps on either side and a glass plate over a table there. We hung a digital camera from above. It did the job. It fit their resources. It was something that they actually could work with, and they didn't have to calibrate the scanner. So many book scanners are badly calibrated, and if you've got a great tech shop, you can do good stuff with them, but a lot of digital SLR cameras, they come right out of the box, nicely calibrated for color, and that worked for them. This is just the quick little research front end that we put there. It's just basically modeled on a Google search, pretty straightforward. The interface itself. There's nothing special to it except that we're putting it together as an integrated package, and again, the point is that for the user to be able, the researcher to be able to tag, annotate, in addition to interacting with the document itself, and obviously being able to print or save to a CD or whatever as you want to walk out. One of the things, and this is something that because of the kind of archive that we were working with there, it was military historical archives, so they're very security sensitive. And so they were very interested in having us build into the system a very granular approach to access controls and tracking the users and how they flowed through the materials. And so part of what we've done then is, and some archives may feel, more public archives will feel less comfortable with that level of knowledge about what each individual researcher is doing, when and where. But the system allows for it, and I think that needn't be something that we should be afraid of necessarily. We should learn how to capture that kind of knowledge, to know how users are working with our content when they hit walls, when they make real discoveries, and to be able to incorporate that into our own approach to curation. Here are a couple of examples of some of the cute little approaches that we've done with visualizing content. These are a couple timelines. We built a suite of, this is another separate story, but another example of us. We do a lot of data visualization work in our own effort with economics and whatnot, and I don't like giving all of my data to Google. And yet, I liked Google's visualization tools. And so what we did is we took their APIs, which are open source, built them into Drupal modules, and then run their APIs from our servers. So we don't need to give them our data, but we're happy to use their modules. Google, by the way, thinks that was, I mean, we talked to them about it later on, and they think it's pretty cool. So we're not getting heat from them. Again, we did the Military Historical Archive of Serbia, now doing Bosnia, and what we're looking for now is to begin to take this back to these pearls of innovation that we've managed to assemble in Eastern Europe, on the borders, if you like, and to bring them back to the United States and look for use cases where we can really take to scale. The challenge that we have is that the phrase, well, Sarajevo did it, so you should be able to do it too, doesn't resonate with a lot of people in the United States. Now, I think that it should, because, I mean, that's sort of a worst case scenario. I mean, come on, guys, if they can do it, what's your problem, right? But nevertheless, I mean, it's much more compelling to pick some reference point in the United States. And, as much as I love the city, to say, well, Chicago did it, you can do it too, is also not a particularly compelling case, right? You need a city that we can relate to. And so we were talking earlier on about Charlottesville, Virginia, Macon, Georgia, Detroit, Baltimore. There are a whole range of kind of mid to small level cities that I think could be really cool to try and work with. And here, and I think this is one of the questions that we may be particularly well suited to approach when it ultimately comes to the sustainability question for projects like this, and we all get there, is that, again, we're not a technology, we're not a software company. We are not, we don't buy into this notion of technology as solutions, right? It's not the sustainability solution. Technology isn't. It rarely is. Sustainability solutions are almost never found in a single organization. nor a single project. They die when the organization dies. They die when the project funding for that particular grant ends. We've seen that all too many times, all of us, I'm sure. Sustainability solutions are networks of mutually interested players, right? Like this room. But even there in communities, I think with the community development work that we've done overseas, we've learned a lot about the value, the power of teams. And so when we're looking for use cases in the United States, that's really what we're aiming at. Not a city archive to work with, but a city where we can find folks with holdings that are of value and interest, folks that have infrastructure, folks that have local expertise, folks that have physical space where you can set up a scanning workshop, folks that have access to labor. These things may be in 5 different organizations, they may be in 3, whatever. But to try and get these different players at federal, state, local, civic levels all engaged actively together towards this common mission of informing and enlightening in order to empower with true interests. And then you begin to get some really cool dynamic stuff that is well beyond well beyond anything that I could imagine here. I mean, I think the beauty of this trash or treasure debate about what should be forgotten so that we can learn new things, as opposed to the Kickstarter of the sort of the beauty in the trivial, you know, is exactly that. There, especially local holdings and a decentralized and diversified approach towards generating content helps us to resolve that, because those places, those sites where that content is of value will drive the production. And you needn't be at such, you know, a stratospheric level trying to pick and choose who wins. If you empower a much broader scope of folk to make those informed choices about content which is truly permanent, then I think you'll get a lot better decisions. I think you'll get a lot of really exciting surprises. And we hope that we can contribute to that process in some very small, modest way. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.